All right. Good morning, people. Happy Monday. Bob here back once again. We're ready to break down some Bitcoin, and we are getting right down to it this morning. Weekly chart. Guess a couple different things here. So and I'll kind of, when I zoom in on the shorter term time frames, we'll take a closer look at this. But you can see here that during the week we did managed to go from this low here in this 19,000 range, popped up to 22.5, hard rejection at the 200 simple moving average, and here we are today, sitting at about 20,500, so down, a solid $2,000 from where we were at the peak a couple days ago. So, taking a look at everything here, we didn't close out the week above this resistance here, but we did close above here. So I think this was a decent sign, at least. I mean, I would have loved to see this be a bullish engulfing candle and close out somewhere in the, say 21,000 or higher range, or anything above 21,000 would have been beautiful, but we didn't get it. Here we are. Now, what I'm going to be looking for here, ideally this level holds up. Ideally, we don't even lose this level and this thing holds up, and then this guy pops up here again, maybe even makes a move up to this $23,000 range this week. The 200 simple is going to act as resistance, pretty strong resistance. And then I think 21.5 is approximately where the 50 moving average on the monthly is. So, we're going to have a ton of resistance between here and here, or here up to here, in this whole area right here. But again, I would think that at some point this week we probably do make a push up towards this level again. It's just a matter of where it comes from, right? So the question becomes, so we've got this, I'd said last week that, ideally this is really what you want to see forming on the bottom here. And maybe it'll be easier if I get rid of the drawings so you can kind of see what I'm talking about again. So down here in the RSI, you had this bottom right here. Then you had this bottom. On the RSI, those are equivalent bottoms approximately. On the price action, this was a lower bottom, bullish divergence. So we got something that we were looking for. Now, last week was up. This week is starting down. And as long as this thing is actually going to start an uptrend, we could probably draw a line starting here, crossing through here. So, but again, it would be logical for it to start down essentially as a retest, right? And you'll see the retest on the shorter term time frames, but that's a big part of what we'll be looking for this week in terms of assessing upside potential. Now, when we zoom in on the daily chart, you can see even more importantly, and we talked about this before it ever even came back down to it, that this was really the level we need to hold, right? We pretty well knew we were going to get a rejection up here. We were prepared for that. This actually played out a little differently than I expected it to. Maybe not totally. I thought it would probably come up just a touch higher. That was the only thing it didn't do, was on this daily candle, was it didn't come up quite as high as I expected. But otherwise, it set a higher high than this one, but not higher than this guy. Didn't set a newer low. However, this day right here, down pretty good, and then overnight we're down once again. But again, this is the level we want to see hold, right? We want to keep this 21 simple on the daily chart and then start another uptrend from here. Really, anything down to basically this level, this 19.7-ish level, would at least keep the potential uptrend. Well, I mean, it is an uptrend. It's not a potential uptrend. Would keep the uptrend intact. The only problem is, and we've seen this, we've seen this story before, right? This is a bear pennant, or bear flag at the moment. We were in a bear pennant. If you take this trend line and this trend line, this was a bear pennant, which technically should have probably broken down. It just didn't. It broke out to the upside. But now, again, we've got a potential to likely bearish flag going now. So again, the more likely scenario, technically speaking, is that it should come back down into this range, assuming it were to fall out like right about here. But again, ideally, we're going to see it sweep down in here and then make another move to the upside, or not even sweep down this far. Ideally, again, we don't want to really see that. I think really anything below this level becomes problematic because that puts us basically back into the bear pennant, makes this a fake out, and it's going to drag us way down here. So that'll be the biggest thing this week is really kind of assessing, are we getting dragged back into this bear pennant look? Are we going to stay in the bear flag and get at least another push to the upside? And maybe, who knows, maybe this thing here forms into an ascending triangle. And then this would be just a fake out of a triangle pattern as opposed to hitting the top of a rising channel, or in this case, again, a bear flag. Tough to say at the moment, right? I mean, stochastic RSI doesn't look great. It's been a sell since that day right there. So that's not really what you'd want to see if you wanted to see continued upside. But you could make the argument that if I drew a line here, connected here, it's going to cross somewhere in here, then as long as this actually kind of curls back up, that would give us exactly what we want to see, where maybe we get another push. And then who knows, maybe we can actually go ahead and extrapolate this guy out a little bit. All of a sudden we've got something that looks an awful lot like a much larger, let's just say maybe it's right there. Now all of a sudden we've got something that looks like a much larger parabola forming, potentially at least, right? I still, all the numbers would suggest that this thing will move to the downside at some point, but when does that happen? That I don't get to make that decision. Now, one thing on the daily that I think might be of interest here is that this trend line right here, touch 1, touch 2, touch 3, broken. And then now we're coming back and potentially retesting this trend line. Now, the issue that I see with that is if we take a look at all this volume in here, right? We've got big volume when this was coming down. We've got big volume that bought that back up. And then we've got fairly big volume in here. But the biggest volume that I see anywhere on this daily chart came in right here, which is right when it was selling off at 22.5. So, and then we've got pretty good volume the 2 days that followed. So, I mean, looking at that realistically, I got to look at it and say, well, it still seems as though there's a pretty significant selling bias here, right? That the selling volume is pretty well exceeding the buy volume across the board here, right? And then if we just kind of take a look back at time here, this is a big red candle here, and you can see the amount of volume. It exceeds everything but this day right here when the sell off at 22.5. But what I find interesting about that is that this was moving down, this one was moving up. We have increasing price and volume, which should be a bullish sign. I don't know that necessarily is going to be the case. Again, just based on the patterns themselves. So that one's tough. That one's tough to say for sure. But again, I point out the volume simply because here we got massive buys as it was being sold off right here, which eventually led to a turnaround. Assuming that these massive buys can eventually lead to a turnaround, then we've potentially got that going for us. But again, looking at this logically speaking, and let's assume for 1 second that it plays out maybe similarly to how this did right here. Here is our first touchdown. Go up here, touch, get a touchdown here, pop up to the upside. And then maybe we spend a handful of days chopping sideways. We do get one more strong push up here, maybe all the way up to like even 24,000, and then that may start our cascade down. And at that point, we are looking at putting in a low that would be equivalent or higher than this guy still. So there are some signs that would suggest that it's not all doom and gloom. And that maybe, just maybe, eventually we actually do turn around. But these bear flag patterns are sucking. I mean, let's be honest here. It's just been one bear flag pattern after another at this point. I mean, or you can call them ascending, broadening wedges based on the RSI. But yeah, I mean, either way, it's been just one after another, and it's those are not ideal patterns. Obviously, all you're really doing in a bear pattern is coming up and testing overhead resistance. And just getting slaughtered by it basically, At some point, I think we do come back up here and test this one, but where does that happen? Who knows? If it happened, now let's say for 1 second that we're very lucky. I'm going to say lucky because, again, this pattern doesn't instill a whole lot of confidence as far as what I'm seeing from the charts. But let's assume for 1 second that it comes down here and we actually do get a push up here. And let's assume for 1 second that maybe this thing actually becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. I put this parabola on here and it actually plays out. Well, then all of a sudden we can actually start talking about something up here retesting this because the measured move, if we broke to the upside of this pattern, actually does bring us up all the way to here. So if we can maintain this uptrend, if in fact Bitcoin can put in a bottom somewhere this week, still basically above 20 grand. Again, I don't even want to see it cross back into here. I don't want to see it lose the 21, but if it does, again, all I want to see is that it bounces off here and then pops back to the upside. And from there, I don't even care what happens because, again, if you get back up here and it doesn't break out, cool, you're short coming down through here. If it breaks out, then the question is, does it break this resistance? If it does, the assumption is that it would move up to this area or potentially get stopped out by this trend line. But either way, you're looking at something in the 26 range. So, not to get too far ahead of ourselves here as far as looking for huge upside targets, because I don't think that's massively reasonable to believe at this point. But that being stated, again, the worst case scenario downside probably puts us, let's just say, somewhere down in this 16.3 range. Ideally, we don't see that number, right? Best case scenario puts us way up here to the upside at 28 and change. Again, doubt we see that number. But I do think that from a realistic standpoint, we should be looking somewhere this week. I'd like to say that 19.5 would be the lowest thing we would see. And then probably, 22.5-ish again, maybe 23,000 would be our potential upside for the week. And that's what I'm going to be looking for. But again, main thing, don't lose the 21, and that's a good start to today, really. Let's go ahead and we're going to zoom in on some shorter term time frames, get this thing wrapped up. 4 hour. So I got this one pulled up. Really, if we could break back above 20,644 here, that would be an ideal scenario. The question is, does it actually hold that, or does it just come right back down and crash through it? Well, the RSI is kind of trying to paint a picture for us right now. This would suggest that in this falling channel here, and I think really the one thing that inspires potentially some confidence for me here, and I'll kind of zoom in on this too, we've got a cup and a potential handle forming here, which is a great pattern if you're looking for upside. So here was essentially the cup. Now we're getting a handle, and it's just a matter of where it finds the support. Once it finds support over here, the expectation is this thing should crank back to the upside. Now let's assume for 1 second that the cup and handle pattern is valid. Here's the cup and the depth of the cup. Here would be the upside target, and we can see that that's somewhere in the 24,000 range. But again, that's assuming first and foremost that it can get back up and above this level, 21,582-ish. Get back up above that, put in a retest, and then blast off. Well, you got the 20 or the 200 on the 4-hour chart moving in here. It has acted as resistance for quite a while now. I mean, Bitcoin has spent a whopping 7 total days above that since all the way back here. So the last 3 months, Bitcoin has barely even touched the 200 simple on the 4-hour chart, let alone been above it. This is where the rubber meets the road this time, right? Like, gotta see an actual push, or this thing again. We're just heading back down into the gutter and back down into way oversold territory, like we've done multiple times now. But again, and again, this little look here doesn't inspire a whole lot of confidence, because really, this is across this line right now, but it needs to stay across that line for another 3 hours and 15 minutes, or the reality is that could just be a rejection there and another rollover, which again puts us right down here. We already lost the 21 on the 4-hour chart. That was lost basically 2 days ago there. But yeah, I mean, this chart doesn't inspire a great deal of confidence at the moment. The only reason that it potentially could is because of the strength of this pull down. This drawdown was pretty significant. We put in a 4-hour candle that was green with some upside push. It's feasible this thing could wrap around right up here and just kind of pop up into this range again. If it does that, we're looking for a retest at 20,644 all day and a nice upside push. And let's say that we do get an upside push out of this, ballpark. Let's call that the pattern. Let's say it pushes through here. Boom, we're right back up to 21.5, and then we got to hope we can clear it. So that would be the 4-hour. Let's take a look at the 1-hour chart here. Now, the 1-hour chart, interestingly enough, and this is the Heikin-Ashi candles, it's holding up right now, and it kind of looks like it put in a little bit of some bullish divergence and kind of a double bottom type of look here. Now it's just got to stay in this territory that's no longer overbought, right? And let's go ahead and we'll draw a trend line on here. I mean, I could almost make the argument that this might be a little bit of a breakout from that, and that maybe we actually do have some decent upside that will come from this. Again, this being a retest. But again, the moving averages, they're a lagging indicator, but they still indicate that obviously there's a lot of pressure right here that would potentially push the price down. I think realistically, in order to avoid more downside here, Bitcoin's got to jump this 200 and do it real fast, probably within the next 2 hours. Or then it becomes much more logical that 4-hour chart where it kind of looks like it could roll back over, it would be more inclined to do so. Now here, just getting in on the shorter term time frames, the 15-minute actually doesn't look too terrible. We got a higher low right here. So maybe a potential small uptrend forming in that regard. Same idea here, though. I mean, you got to see it clear this 20,585. But yeah, let's go ahead and get out of here. I mean, in the short term, this could be an upside target, anything along this line. But maybe it even comes up here, breaks out, and gets us going. And that's really ideally what we're going to be looking for today. If we get too much more downside here, things become a little more problematic. Right now, we're basically backtesting this breakout over here, which certainly a positive sign there that we're at least holding it for now. But you flip this into resistance, and then all of a sudden we do look at some more downside and maybe significant at that. Let's go back over to the daily and just verify one thing against that, or the weekly, excuse me. And we talked about it already, but again, just kind of looking at that short-term chart. Let's see, 21,000, so 20,900. Yeah, I mean, totally logical place that you could potentially see rejection there. And again, going back to this chart, saying, oh yeah, that's pretty darn close, 20,900. That's going to be a number we need to get back over and get back over soon. Now, what would be nice here is this thing blasts off all the way up to here, comes back down, retests. And if we can hold 20,770 at that point, or 20, somewhere in that range, now we've got an inverse head and shoulder pattern to work with. That gets us an upside target, kind of moving up here into, this range again. And again, these things, these numbers all line up with some of the things we just spoke of. So yeah, definitely some intrigue here. Again, ideally, this is the low already. Ideally, on the daily, we're going to hold that 21 simple and not drop below it. And let's go ahead. Let's keep pushing to the upside. Nobody should be opposed to this. It just, again, there are a lot of indications as to why that might not necessarily be the case. But alas, we shall find out. Hey, pleasure as always. Appreciate you guys. We will catch up again tomorrow. Thanks so much. Have a great day.